Hi, everyone here and around the world. And more good news. We've broken through 278,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much. And tonight, I'm going back 27 years ago to March 13th, 1997, beginning around 7:30 p.m. Pacific time in Phoenix, Arizona, when mysterious aerial craft of different sizes and shapes were seen from Tucson at the bottom lower right map corner, 112 miles southeast of Phoenix, all the way up to the Luke Air Force Base. And near that same time, the large Hale-Bopp comet was headed for its approach to Earth. And Luke Air Force Base is northwest of Phoenix, and the Estrella Mountains are southwest of Phoenix. Other eyewitnesses were in South Mountain, south of Phoenix, and there were reports from Scottsdale and Tempe, Mesa to Gilbert, and Casa Grande. And many people were gathering in various places to see the large Hale-Bopp comet that was headed for its closest approach to Earth on March 22nd, 1997, and its closest perihelion approach to the Sun on April 1st, 1997. And here is NASA's beautiful first discovery image of Hale-Bopp 2 years earlier on July 23rd, 1995. The Hale-Bopp comet won't be seen again near Earth for roughly another 2,399 years, not returning to our inner solar system until around the year 4,385. But something very mysterious occurred only about 1 week before the Hale-Bopp comet reached its closest approach to Earth, photographed here by NASA on March 22nd, 1997. A date close to this March 13th, 1997 headline in USA Today, quote, "Skies, phone lines, light up Arizona, unidentified. For 106 minutes on March 13th, 1997, people saw something like this V-shaped object flying over Arizona. UFOs? The only thing certain is that it still haunts residents in Phoenix." At the time, I was doing live broadcasts with Art Bell for Coast to Coast AM and for Dreamland Radio. And we received calls from Phoenix witnesses who calculated that one large V-shaped UFO or craft was at least 2 miles long. 5 eyewitnesses were in a car south of Phoenix at 8:30 p.m. when Tracy Rhodes was driving from her Tucson home with her daughter Emily. They were going to a state swimming championship along with her mother and 2 friends, and they were all astonished when they saw an enormous triangle appeared in the sky with a light at each corner moving toward them from the Casa Grande Mountains. The driver estimated the size of that huge triangular craft passing over their car was nearly 2 miles long. Neither military nor civilian sources were able to explain what the huge unidentified triangular craft was. And then there seemed to be another wave of UFO reports emerging around 10 to 10:30 p.m. that same March 13th, 1997 night. Those sightings were different from the earlier reports, as those later eyewitnesses talked more about seeing large orange spheres and arcs of light over Phoenix. In this photo, South Mountain comes in from the left, passing in front of the more distant Estrella mountain range at the center of this photo and extending far right. In the twilight, Phoenix city lights are coming on in front of the 2 mountain ranges. Dr. Lynne Kitei M.D., a longtime Phoenix Lights investigator, took this photograph and noted in her bottom statement that, quote, unexplained sightings frequently occur where the South Mountain on the left and the Estrellas on the right intersect, close quote. Recently, another UFO witness from the night of March 13th, 1997, contacted me to say she has never seen any illustration that exactly matched what she, her mother, and father saw above her parents' house at that base of South Mountain. Her name is Shelley O'Neal. On the left, with her mother, Marilyn, on the right. Shelley told me she wanted to add their March 13th, 1997 experience to my Earthfiles report. And she said, in loving memory of my mother, Marilyn. Shelley now lives in Dallas, Texas, but she thinks that her mother often and thinks of her about that night.
It was around 8 o'clock p.m., March 13th, 1997. And after I finished dinner with my parents, we went outside in the backyard to enjoy a jacuzzi for about 20, 30 minutes. Then we get out. My stepdad is in the porch putting the cover on, and my mom asked me, let's go look at the Hale-Bopp comet. So we walk all the way to the back of her backyard. She backed up South Mountain, and we were looking towards the northeast of Phoenix area. And within 2-3 seconds of looking up in the sky, looking for the Hale-Bopp comet, we began to see a massive, dark, boomerang-shaped object that had these enormous, round, glowing auburn lights. They didn't really shine out, but it was all within these huge domes underneath this massive boomerang. And my mom and I, at that moment, we were so shocked. Words couldn't form out of my mouth. I couldn't say, look up or see that. I was making these gurgle noises, and I noticed my mom was sounding just like I was. We were both so stunned. It was like when you're dreaming and you know where you can't speak, but you try so hard in your dream and you can't speak or move. It was almost that feeling.
And what were you sensing as a conscious being from what this was, even though you don't know what it is? Were you sensing something, whether danger or was it a threat or not?
I didn't feel a threat. I was completely shocked to my core. I was dumbfounded. And after it passed, it was a good 7 to 10 seconds, I was able to say the words, "Did you see that?" And I ran to the front of the house to go finish seeing what this might be. The sense I had was just pure amazement and completely stunned. I wasn't scared, very excited, just like my mom. She was really excited. And that was it. It was just in complete shock. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak a word. I just was grunting like my mom was grunting. It was just complete shock.
And was there any sound coming from it?
Completely silent. And the one thing I do remember, as I ran through the house to the front, because she backed up to the mountain, this thing looks like it was going around the corner of this mountain where my mom lived, the edge of South Mountain. And I ran to the front, and the feeling I got then was different than the feeling I got in the backyard. The feeling I got then, it was pure silent. Like I didn't hear a cricket, no noise. And when I was out front by myself, I got an eerie feeling and ran back in the house. And at that time, my mom was on the phone with 911, and she was calling, to report what we saw. She was just as shocked as I was. And who do you call? We didn't know who to call. She called the news station. She called the airport. She called 911, the first people. And they were saying to her at that time, our phones are lighting up. We're getting a lot of calls about these lights. And my mom said, these aren't lights. This is a craft. This is a enormous boomerang-shaped craft. And it floated over our heads. And I was hearing her speak to the woman on the other side of the phone, and they were very interested and said, we've been getting these phone calls for the last 5 minutes.
One of the most prominent investigators of the Phoenix Lights mystery is Dr. Lynne Kitei, M.D., who founded the Phoenix Lights Network that has documented many orange glowing phenomena over Phoenix on dates before and after March 13, 1997, beginning with the top left A1 photo dated February 6, 1995. Then the next, dated February 6, 1995. Then the next C3 photo is dated January 23, 1997. Then the next D4 photo is dated January 23, 1997. Then the next E5 photo is dated January 23, 1997. Then the next F6 photo is dated January 23, 1997. Then the next G7 photo is dated January 14, 1998. And then the next H8 photo is dated October 10, 2001. And then the next I9 photo is dated September 2002. And then the next J10 photo is dated September 2003. But why have peculiar orange lights persisted since Dr. Kitei began photographing them on February 6, 1995, a full 2 years before the dramatic March 13, 1997, 2-mile-long triangular and boomerang-shaped aerial craft that seemed to float silently in the sky?
What most people are not aware, there's so much to this story. At 3 a.m., there was an alleged crewman from Luke Air Force Base who called the National UFO Reporting Center, Peter Davenport, totally professional, very detailed. In fact, he recorded it. Part of that recording is in our documentary so people can hear it firsthand. Jets were sent out from Luke Air Force Base to intercept one of these over-mile-wide craft that was hovering over central Phoenix, 7th Avenue and Indian School at 8:30 p.m. on March 13th during the mass sighting. And as they approached, the lights dimmed, and then the entire craft blinked out and disappeared. Freaking out, one of the pilots, this alleged crewman, said he helped out of his aircraft, and that Luke went on lockdown. I cannot confirm that, but this is what the alleged crewman said. That Luke Air Force Base went on lockdown after that. And there were civilians, very important, that not only saw these jets with afterburners leave Luke Air Force Base, but after the craft disappeared and the Luke Air Force left, the craft reappeared and continued slowly on its way over South Mountain. The recording itself is pretty mind-boggling, and obviously the military was quite aware of what was going on.
And what time was that when the afterburners went off and then people saw the lights blink out?
This was at 8:30 p.m. during the mass sighting.
Well, there was a lot that happened after 8:30.
Oh, yeah, and before.
Yeah.
But they, obviously were aware that something was going on. And again, there were civilians that saw this happening,
right.
Which only confirms that, the military was aware that something
Right.
unusual was going on, and that it probably wasn't them.
Right.
Especially when it was over the airport, over Class B restricted airspace, over the tarmac.
Right.
That's mind-boggling in itself. And no one was harmed, no one was hurt. But nonetheless, there was a group of air traffic controllers that saw it actually turn against the wind. And, these lights were attached to something. We've heard that over and over again, whether these lights were attached to something. Some people saw it right above them and looked in between the lights, and it blocked out the stars. Others actually saw craft, gunmetal bottoms. Some saw windows. It's really intriguing and fascinating and mind-boggling.
I wonder if there is anyone in the audience tonight who was also in the Phoenix and Tucson region that night of March 13th, 1997, when both the massive boomerang-shaped craft and the massive V-shaped craft and huge big orange lights were reported. And another question is, how many of you here tonight have had face-to-face experiences with what you think are UFOs and or non-human entities, meaning technology and beings with consciousness that are not Homo sapien and not from Earth? And I'd like to throw to Ian now in England and ask, can you do a rough tally tonight, Ian, in the chat about how many viewers have answered yes to those questions? And if some of you would not mind talking to me off the record, please email me directly at earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Brad has put the email address up on the screen. And include your phone number. I always keep phone and contact information confidential. And right now, Ian, have any viewers in the chat said that they were in Phoenix on that extraordinary night of March 13th, 1997?
Hi, Linda. Yes, well, in the chat this evening, I think we've got someone called Pamela. Pamela Jean says, on that date, I went to see a hypnotist who told me there were no aliens, and then they flew over his house. So that was very ironic that should happen. I think she's actually 60 miles south of Phoenix. I think that was where she said she was from. But yeah, I've asked Eric to reach out in some sort of poll and see if we can get the tally of people who may have witnessed that. Do you want to just repeat the question and let's try and get that?
Yeah, go ahead. One of the things that I know from my work for so many years is that often people are afraid to say that they saw anything unusual because they feel like they're going to be criticized. And hopefully the Earthfiles YouTube channel, combined with whatever congressional hearings are going to come more, that we're going to move into an era now, I hope, in which firsthand interactions, and that includes the people in military and medicine and science and all sorts of various venues in which they may have had interactions with technology and with beings, that hopefully we're entering a new era, hopefully starting in November with more hearings, perhaps Senator Gillibrand, and continuing into 2025 with more and more information. And I want to thank Shelley O'Neal for coming to me and talking about this and agreeing that one of the frustrations that everybody had was that they were describing what they saw, which might not be what other people saw in various other places. And now we are beginning to be more sophisticated, and with her work that she did to get those 3 illustrations done for this Earthfiles YouTube channel, it really helped crystallize in my own mind that when people were talking about a boomerang that was a shape that was huge and massive, was completely different from the V shape, which may have been completely different from the triangle. And there are so many stories. I remember Art had called me and said, you know, we've got to start getting in touch with people in Phoenix. And within, I think it was only a week, that I had half a dozen really dramatic interviews that we put on the air. And then more and more people were coming forward saying what they had seen. And the confusion that week was, how can there be so many different shapes at such huge sizes? And that was sort of what March 13th, 1997, it is in my mind associated with, were there 10? Some people estimated 10 different sizes and shapes of craft. And tonight we were focusing on the 2 and the orange lights. But I also want to share, this is an excerpt from an interview that I did back then when everybody was calling everybody live and we were trying to get on the air. And I talked with some people in real estate, and they had been up on a hill and they were overlooking a valley area in the South Mountain region. And they saw this huge, gigantic craft. And this is a quote. If it was a V or was a triangle or whatever it was, I'm not certain. We were looking at lights, and we were trying to look at the structure underneath, and whatever this was, quote, must have been illuminated from inside because you could see windows. I saw windows and I saw shapes at the windows. And I asked, what shape? And he answered, squares. They were square windows, and that surprised me. And I asked, and what kind of shadows were you seeing? Because he mentioned that he saw shadows at these windows. And he said, they were gray shadows. I think that there were 4. And when the lights went off and on, that sort of blinded me. But I remember that the gray shapes were like what I've seen on TV. And he said to me that this was definitely a UFO. This was an extraterrestrial kind of ship. It is a ship that doesn't come from our planet. And the 4 shapes that I saw at the window reminded me of the shapes of the gray beings on TV. That was just in one case of people who were doing real estate, and they were configuring a land, and this huge thing came, and that's what they saw. So that was earlier, before people were seeing it at night. And I've always thought of this as being particularly interesting because there were so many different facets to it. And why did all of this show up in that one region at March 13th, 1997? And then to learn that Dr. Kitei had other photos that she had been able to take that went a longer span of time, and that they kept being these orange lights that we saw in the illustration that Shelley O'Neal had done, versus the big triangle or V. Some people said it looked like a V, some people said it looked like a solid triangle. And anybody in any profession who has firsthand information about what might have been happening at that time, and with the closest approach of the Hale-Bopp comet just 1 week later and getting photographed by NASA, was there some connection? So on that note, I'm going to throw back to Ian to see what you have been learning from people in the chat.
Yeah, in the chat tonight we've got Yin Yang, who tells me that she actually saw the Phoenix lights. I remember I was driving home from work on the freeway. It was huge. I kept looking while I was driving, and the size was enormous. I kept looking and wondering what it was. And the other night, on Sunday night I was speaking to someone who was a 10-year-old child at the time in Phoenix, and they described it as too big for the sky. And it made quite an impression on a 10-year-old. Also, two people have written to me about the Phoenix lights, and from our audience. One says, I witnessed them in northwest Phoenix when these crafts, yes, plural crafts, passed over it in front of about 50 other witnesses. They say that it was not a triangle formation, it was in a boomerang formation at first, and 7 lights dimmed out and reappeared on the west end of the Mile End formation, this creating a chevron formation. This was one thing that pointed out that these orbs were independent craft. There was a type of energy field that connected these crafts, blurring out the background, and it said, making it look like there was one single craft. As we were discussing what we were seeing together, 2 F-16 fighter planes were witnessed flying in the same direction and path that the UFOs were headed. I remember this explicitly because one guy said they were F-15s, and I told him Luke Air Force Base was a school for fighter pilots trying to fly the F-16 Falcon. Also, a lot of people are referring to how it was passed off as flares by the military, and a lot of people are saying if you actually saw the actual lights yourself, you would know they were not flares.
I think that the young person who said it was the craft were too big for the sky, that is the, I would say that back then to now, that was the reaction that I remember of people trying to say, if you look up and something is as large as the sky and you don't see anything else in any direction, then it's definitely doesn't feel like it's made from Earth at all.
No, and some people describe the actual the detail. One that I've got here from Tom says, it totally blows your mind. I witnessed the Phoenix lights in 1997 as it glided about 100 yards above our heads. I will never forget what I saw. The biggest, most massive thing I've ever seen to this day. It was a V-shaped craft with 3 lights on each bottom side of its wings and a larger amber-coloured light at the tip. It was completely silent until the left wing was directly above us, and then we heard, but mostly felt, a buzzing, humming sound that I can best compare to a power line transformer or high voltage power lines. It had some sort of distortion around it, like when you pump your gas and the fumes distort the air. It was very similar, but we could still make out the craft pretty well. It was a gunmetal black, and I mean dark black. It glided slowly towards the southeast until we lost it over the other mountain. And they were actually on a mountain that crossed the street from the house because it was the best night to see the Hale-Bopp comet, as you mentioned.
Well, and Dr. Kitei's description that there was this lockdown at Luke Air Force Base, and that's not done idly. And that on the tarmac itself, you would have the highest cut off everything around it. And it appears, as she interpreted, that whoever was in charge of what was happening at Luke, they must have had some other information about what was in these gigantic craft.
Yeah, some people are still, well, some people have the opinion that it was one of ours, the so-called TR-3B, that it was a military operation or a military craft that was somehow involved, top secret craft. But I don't know about this. This has divided people's opinion ever since about whether it was one of ours that we don't know about or whether it was an actual ET craft. But one of the most interesting things I find about it was when I spoke with Dr. Lynne Kitei in 2019, and she told me about the factor of missing time that was involved in this, in that some videos seem to suggest that there may have been an element of missing time for some witnesses.
And she and I both talked about a facet that a lot of people haven't heard much about, except I was able to do a report for Coast to Coast and Dreamland about 1 week later after March 13th. And that was, I got a phone call from a man who I had interviewed on the East Coast about a very particular base, and he had lots of knowledge about presence of UFOs and ETs here. And the focus, though, in my research with him had nothing to do with Phoenix or the West. It had to do with the East Coast. But that is why when the phone rang and I picked it up and I recognized the voice, and he said, "I can't talk long, but I want you to know that last night," it was the morning after, "last night, one of our most sensitive defense satellites was melted. Okay, now jump to when I finally got to meet Dr. Lynne Kitei for the first time, and we were talking about the various aspects that we were all learning about what in the world was going on March 13th, 1997. I told her about this private conversation. It was a person who had contracts and was involved in the building of computer operations for the Pentagon. He was at that level. And told her that he said one of our top secret defense satellites had been melted. And I remember she said, "I know that too." Somebody had told her. So there are ingredients of how much did the government know about what was going to happen? How much did they not know? And how much might have been a complete surprise by some gathering that had its own goal, and there was no negotiation with what was happening with our government. And there's probably a lot more possible reasonings. And right now, I'm curious, we're at about a half hour after, are there any people in the chat who were there in Tucson or Phoenix, or had relatives or know anybody who was there who might have told you different facets? Like, I learned about the gray shapes at the windows only from one people, husband and wife, in a profession, which was real estate. And the wife was definite about seeing 4 shapes that were humanoid at a window in the large, it wasn't for them a boomerang, it was a triangle. So I'm wondering now, how many people may have other information about what happened that night that we haven't talked about now. And I'll throw it back to you, Ian, for comments and questions you already have.
Yeah, and also I'll update you. We've posted the poll up at the moment. Have you had face-to-face encounters with UFOs and or ETs? It's currently running a dead heat, 50-50.
Wow.
And we've got 446 votes so far. So we've got 223 people who have responded to our in the positive to say they have had face-to-face encounters with UFOs and ETs in our chat tonight.
This is amazing. That's a lot, actually. And which type? There are grays that are short and probably AI. There are tall grays, 7 to 8 feet tall, that appear to be the ones in charge. There are the tall whites that grow 10 to 12 feet tall. There are blondes, short and tall. There are reptilians that range from looking like lizards to standing up alligators. There are ones that have teal blue. Think of a teal blue that like neon tetra type blue, only a little darker, and their skin is that color. The list goes on, and it would be fascinating to know from the 223 who answered yes, which type have you interacted with?
That's right, it is important to find out the type. Going back to the people who witnessed the actual Phoenix lights themselves, Tom ends his comment to me with, when you see one of these craft, your whole perception changes. It was actually an ominous feeling to see something of that size just glide through the night sky like it was nothing. And I remember when I first met up with Shelley O'Neal, and she's in the chat this evening, so I'm glad to have her here with
Hi,
us
Shelley.
Yeah, hi Shelley. It was great to meet her in Barcelona, and it had obviously had such an impact on her. It just shows that the cover-ups that the military tried to put out to say it was flares, just the people who witnessed it themselves
That's right.
are just not buying it. Something else that people need to mention, that people want me to mention, is that one of the first people to see it was a pilot who it was later revealed it was actually the actor Kurt Russell. Which
Yes.
added a lot of credibility to the sighting as well.
Yes, and there have been articles in newspapers a long time ago. I had collected some about the fact that he spoke right up. He didn't try to divert. He was willing to say, this is me and this is what I saw. And we need a lot more of that.
Yeah, on to some questions. We've got Philip Pentek writes tonight in the chat. If one wants to start investigating UFOs, what suggestions can you give? I want to volunteer my time. Well, I don't know what suggestions you can give, but my advice would be to get involved, look at meetup groups, look at joining any local groups, perhaps online, but also get out there and start investigating any local sightings, contacting people and getting involved. Maybe even with them. Some people would suggest joining MUFON, and I know that some people say that MUFON is more active in some areas than others. I think it depends on the personnel that they've got there.
And OPUS for people in the abduction syndrome, that Lester Velez from MUFON founded OPUS with the goal and hope that people who had interactions with beings who might have what would be suppressed memories, that they would help with hypnosis. And you can either write Earthfiles for more information about OPUS, or look it up, capital OPUS, an acronym for this OPUS group to help people in the abduction syndrome. And right now, as we are at the end of 2024, soon to be into 2025, and with the remote viewers from the late 1980s working with the NSA and the DIA, who said that by 2030 that there would be a lot of geophysical change on the Earth, a lot of climate change, and a lot of water. And we seem to be on track for that. I wonder if there are any people who are in the category of having been abducted, having been shown movies in your mind, or you've had telepathic communication. Does anybody have a fresh, like within this past year, a fresh experience in which you were being shown real problems coming soon, having to do with water everywhere? I'm just curious if that comes up now.
Yeah, well, let's reach out again once again to our audience, and let's see if anyone can give us any more information on that. I'm just looking as well at some of the comments in the chat. We've got J. Hendricks Fanatic 2 says, my parents lived in Sedona, Arizona, and told me about strange red lights flying over their house a day before it was reported nationally in a small blurb on the front page of USA Today.
Yeah, so March 13th, 1997. And Ian, I just can't help but think that maybe from an extraterrestrial point of view, that there was something significant about the timing with the Hale-Bopp comet, and that there seemed to be this confluence of activity, especially in the Phoenix area, in that, we'll say, week before and then the comet, and after, there was a concentration of events.
Yeah, it makes me guided upwards that was the time when the craft decided to reveal itself, or the crafts in sort of in many different ways to many different people.
And who's friendly, who's not friendly, and who's neutral? Those are such important questions, and I hope that we're going to be in a new era where we're going to start getting more insights into what all of this means. And behind all of this is the haunting report by the man on the East Coast who was producing computer operations for the Pentagon and Intel, that he would have the information that a satellite had melted. And then when I finally met Lynne Kitei, and we were talking about this, and she also heard that same report. That seems like a very aggressive act, meaning melting one of our important satellites. So who and what was present there on March 13th, 1997 remains a mysterious question that haunts a lot of people who have been in the military, and they may know a lot more. And that's part of what I would like to do, is to provoke a lot of you who have other information to get in touch with me so that we could communicate, not necessarily in the public, but could communicate as I do with several people who are very helpful. And Ian, is everything okay? We're having a lot of technical problems tonight, but let's just say, all right, that's the world. That's what it is to be human on Earth. Technical problems.
Yeah, Linda, we're also running another poll at the moment. What ETs have you encountered? Grey, Nordics, reptilians, or insectoids? So we're looking at those at the moment. I've just looked at the figure. Greys are leading with 59% on the statistic on that one.
And I'll add a footnote. It was only recently a person that no one would know in the public, a person who I will say has a lot of deep knowledge about the evolution of our planet in relationship to other intelligences that have been using this planet for a very long time. And they said to me, the Greys are complex in relationship to this planet because the 7 to 8 foot tall are extremely ancient and are really the ones in control. But they have made so much artificial intelligence that does work for them, meaning the smaller ones, the AI, sort of like on the path that we will eventually be going with AI everywhere, that the Greys have that. But said this, they genuinely would like to see humanity evolve. They genuinely feel that this is an important experiment, implying that the tall Greys are involved. And when all of the discussions I've had with Whitley Strieber, who I met for the first time actually before communion came out to the public, and we were talking about all of the complicated animal mutilations, human abductions, harvests of all sorts of things. But I think that Whitley, over time and evolution, has come to feel that there is a concern by some of the taller Greys about what is happening to humanity on this particular planet, and not that they want anything bad to happen. And the nuances are so important. What are the differences between the different non-humans? How many are working with each other, as it is suggested by people in the military, that there's alliances and then there are wars among the different non-humans? And that takes me back to William Mills Tompkins, who I did that 5-hour recorded interview before he died. I think he died at age 94 or 95. And he is the one who filled up 5 hours of questions. He knew a lot about the history of the planet and in relationship to what had happened in World War II. and that he is the one who said World War II was an extraterrestrial war fought through human bodies. And that question rings to this very day. Mesopotamia is again in wars, and according to him, that goes way back. And then you come up into more modern history and you get to World War II, and you're still dealing with conflicts between other consciousnesses in the universe that we have not even been introduced to yet. And we seem to be at such a strange, if you want to call it, line in the sand on the planet. And it feels like more violence is potentially there, and how much more important it is for every one of us humans, all 8 billion, to try to concentrate in our minds on eliminating death and war and guns and knives and poisons and drugs and all of it, to try to get us back on some kind of a path in which we would be able to negotiate mentally, in symbols, however, with actual extraterrestrial life forms that are here now, are further beyond us in the Milky Way galaxy, Andromeda, and the thousands, millions of other galaxies. And that it is something that is on this, to me, it's almost insane that we're now still on a planet where we've never been told the truth by either the heads of, we'll say, other consciousnesses in the ET side, or by humans, power brokers through history. The general humanity is always seemingly kept in the dark. And I hope these hearings coming up and beginning will in fact occur in November and keep going in 2025. And that here at the Earthfiles YouTube channel, I'm going to keep trying to bring fresh information to all of the various questions that are going to be posed in the congressional hearings. And if I have more information, I'm going to try to share it. And Ian, I'm going to flip back to you to see where we are in the numbers tonight.
Okay, well, we'll leave the poll running until Eric closes it, and then I'll give you the results. But Grey's are currently 57% on that, and I'll give you the breakdown of the others in a moment. I wanted to bring you some news that Uncle Dave's Kitchen is in the chat this evening, and he says, I saw the Phoenix lights. It flew right over my head by 30 feet. I could clearly see the bottom of the craft. It was one piece of material.
What was the shape, Ian? What was that shape? If he's there,
okay, we'll throw it back. Yeah, please tell us the shape, and also if
and
you want
size.
Yep, and size. Yep. So let's see if you can give us some details. While we're on that subject, Brian Lau's here and says, I've seen orbs while night fishing next to Indigenous American burial mounds. Is there a correlation between the mounds and this phenomena and the Indigenous peoples?
Well, I have always thought that the Cherokee, going all the way back to working for the first time in September of 1979 on what became A Strange Harvest, my investigations of animal mutilations, that I was in Denver then. And between Denver and Arizona, there are lots of areas where there are a variety of different Indian civilization focuses. And I remember having a discussion with one of the sheriffs in a county who had a Cherokee blood background. And he was talking to me about how he and a few others had come to the conclusion that there was some connection between their Cherokee blood and UFOs and ETs. And I said to him, well, you know what? My dad's mother married a full-blood Cherokee who had come from North Carolina. And interestingly enough, it was that bloodline of my grandmother's husband that led to the name Moulton. And his family that he had evolved out of, the Cherokee, they had a Moulton, an M-O-U-L-T-O-N, in some of the various people that they worked with through the Cherokee. And I have now, in this year of 2024, for the first time again, I have come across several other references, other people very interested in how many have pure blood, close blood to the Cherokee. And it is another question that I want to do a lot more deep research about, because it's becoming clear that our Indian tribes, I think, are one of those interfaces between extraterrestrial genetic manipulation, of which they have probably done thousands of times for at least several million years, and that we are an experiment, others were experiments, and that the different tribes, the different nations, all of it, if we knew the whole big picture, something is being worked out. Is it evolutionary to try to take out violent nature? That's the question that hangs in the air all the time. If there's an experiment, what is it? And for those of you who have replied that you've had interactions with both ETs and seen the technology, how many of you would be willing to email me, earthfiles@earthfiles.com, and or message and chats to Ian about your perspective, and if you have had any exchange, whether it was in dream or whether it was orbs, or where you see movies that go through this part of your mind. The movies are, that's what they call the mind's eye. Has anybody had something that when they woke up or got up, they felt like they understood more about the relationship between being Homo sapien test on beautiful Earth by beings that may be 1 million, 2 million, 5 million years older than we are? That's as hard to grasp, Ian, as a craft that's bigger than the sky.
Absolutely. And tonight, just as you were talking actually about the Cherokee, Nathan Tyson posted, "I'm an enrolled member of EBCI, Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Our words for star people, interesting enough, are Pleiades, those who come from the stars." And I want to mention as well that we've had Uncle Dave's Kitchen has responded. He says, "I'm here. It was a boomerang about a mile wide. The light was liquid, like lava dripping down, stopping and returning back into openings at the bottom of the craft." So such detail there about the craft that he witnessed at such a close quarters. And yes, please contact us at earthfiles@earthfiles.com or ian@earthfiles.com as well.
And if he can answer right now while we're still on the air, it would be fascinating to know, has he had any movies in his mind, either waking up in a dream, or sometimes these come in when people are standing on some kind of specific stone or sand, that they'll get movies and get communication if they have been abductees. And what would be his understanding of why there might be a focus on him?
Yeah, let's stay in touch. Please contact us. I know he's reached out and says, wonders how he can contact us. But yes, please contact us via email at earthfiles@earthfiles.com and ian@earthfiles.com. Please include your confidential contact details so we can get back to you.
Including phone number.
Follow up with you. Yes, please. Here's the results of the poll, Linda.
Okay.
What ETs have you encountered? Greys, 56%. Nordics or tall whites, 23%. Reptilians, 10%. And insectoids, 11%. Don't forget, some people have probably witnessed more than one type as well.
This is very interesting and not actually surprising in many ways. The people who have had interactions with insects, do you mean the praying mantis, the 8-foot tall green, looks very much like an earth praying mantis, that it seems to be involved in the soul recycling technology that I have written about extensively in my Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2? That's the praying mantis. There is the Trantaloid, Trantaloid. That was presented to Ronald Reagan back in March 6th to 8th, 1981, right after he had become an elected president. And that is the Camp David meeting that I've talked to you about and have written about at Earthfiles. And in that meeting, the CIA, NSA, DIA, all of the intel analysts who were there to present him different facets, they told him that the name Trantaloid had been given by Emmett Chappell, who was a biologist who worked for one of the intel labs on the East Coast. And I remember asking, I wonder what Trantaloid, why Trantaloid? And they said, well, it's also confusing that another ET group is called a heplaloid. And that may be, the heplaloid may be the one that is in the video that is about the color of peanut butter, black eyes, and it seems to be choking, and it's a very controversial video. But I was told at one time that that was a real video. They didn't understand why it was, why did it exist the way it is, but they said they thought that was a heplaloid. And these are names that Ronald Reagan said during the hearing at Camp David, according to the transcript. You mean we even have names for these things? And yes, and for a long time. And the concept of the Trantaloid as being a dangerous insect civilization from Epsilon Eridani, only 10.5 light years from Earth, was quite fascinating to me because it was completely different from the praying mantis. I've learned a lot and seen hundreds of sketches for 45 years of the praying mantis, but I had never seen anyone talk about the Trantaloid or seen sketches until I became aware of Ronald Reagan's briefing. And that led to other people, and that the Trantaloid would be like a standing up beetle, a specific kind of beetle. But why is it interpreted as being a real threat? Some other people have said, well, it may not be a threat like we would go to war and kill a nation because we wanted to get rid of some geopolitical problem. He said the insects just want planets. They just want to take over planets. They want Earth without humans and others on it. So it wouldn't necessarily be that something would be attacking Earth out of the blue. It would be more in the category of expanding territory. And who do we have in the tall whites and the Nordics and the grays and the ebens and others? Who do we have that would help keep any territorial expansions out of our garden of Earth? And whether or not that is the accurate, context of talking and thinking about these different insects. Whether that's true or not, it at least helps me think that there could be a lot of different intelligences that might show up in our planet or in our solar system for reasons that only they know, but not because they're here to cause war or threat, because they don't want to be at war with beings perhaps like the Greys and the Tall Whites and some of the Nordics and so forth. And we're in speculation land now, except it is not speculation. If there are many different types of extraterrestrial consciousnesses, they're here on this planet now. They have a base in Ganymede, a moon around Jupiter. They go on out into solar systems that may be only 10 light years, 20 light years, 30 light years. And that the truth is, we're in a universe that probably is one of an infinite number of universes. I think Roger Penrose would say, yes, that's true. And everything is recycling within consciousness with a capital C that has mathematical bases and mathematical languages for everything. And that frequencies are the key between our dimension and other dimensions. And that there are advanced intelligences who know how to mix and match frequencies in and out of dimensions to travel light years in seconds. And that is eventually going to be solid information here on this planet. Meanwhile, who was in the big black, we'll call it the not complete triangle, but the V, who was in the big 2-mile long triangle, who was in the beautiful craft, sort of like a boomerang that Shelley and her illustrator did. And you go on, and it's fascinating that we are seeing machines and we're seeing lights, and they are totally fascinating. If only we could move ourselves into a world in which we had protection and we knew it, but that we could then explore this massive, who knows how many, consciousnesses of other life forms, other planets, other solar systems, other galaxies. And meanwhile, protect beautiful Earth. Learn how to be in balance with this gorgeous planet without over CO2ing it, without over anything that now is tipping the Earth away from being a protector planet to one that will have a lot of problems if we humans do not start changing and keep changing our what have been self-destructive relationships with a lot of this planet. And I think it's possible that some of the non-humans are very concerned because they don't want to see Earth hurt. They don't want to see their experiment fritter away into our self-destruction. So as we get to the end of this hour of Earthfiles YouTube channel, I loved exploring again behind those headlines with Shelley, with Dr. Kitei, and with others. And that was just one event 27 years ago. And here we are at a time where so much could be unfolding in which humans will be going into space, that I pray every day that the thought that dwells in the light is going to help humanity start getting into the exciting, mind-blowing solar system and space that we're in, ending wars, ending violence, going to agape, love and hugs for everyone, everywhere. And on that note, Ian, agape hug to you and Eric and Brad and my family and Fluffy and Chocolate and everyone and all of our furry souls. May we get through the next 3 to 4 weeks with no violence, peaceful transitions, to explore with each other what we know, what we experience, with clearly other intelligences who have come and gone on this planet for a very long time. And how exciting it would be to start learning from them as they have been learning from us. So, agape hug everywhere, and I'll see you next week.
Turn on closed captions for YouTube videos by clicking the white CC button on the lower right. The default language for Linda's videos is English. If you would like to see the captions in another language, click on the white settings button next to the CC button. Select Subtitles CC and then select Auto Translate. Select a language, and the captions will now appear in that language.
Sort of gone through, and they will hold their heads. I never had a cat do that before. And they'll pull against the comb, helping me get out snarls. And I think it's the best they've ever been.